Hi, I'm back. If you are autistic, I am going to try and read your mind right now and tell you 8 things that you fundamentally need pretty much regularly. And if you get these things, you are probably going to feel the most optimal that you've ever felt. So let's dive straight into it. Hi, to anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Jade. This is my beautiful healing space, JMS Wellbeing, and I do videos on lots of things, but predominantly about autism, as I am a late diagnosed autistic individual. And I do thought provoking content, anything to do with mental health and psychology. And yeah, if that is something that you are interested in, please do stick around. If you are returning, I love having you here. Thank you for coming back. So, the first thing is you need a space where you can be completely on your own regularly. And for some people, you might be thinking, like completely on your own. Yes, completely on your own. It does not matter how much you love other people, even if you get to be in a space with other people and you feel comfortable with them, you will need a space where you can recharge just in your own head, in your own space of comforts and things where there is no demand on you and you just get to recharge and recover from all of life's expectations. I think this is really unique to autistic people. I don't think it's unique to the human condition, the human sort of fabric. I think that we all need it from time to time. People who are on the autistic spectrum need this regularly. Like, I love my children, I love my husband, but I can't be in space with them all of the time. I need recovery time, and I often need that to be on my own. So, I am very fortunate because I get to come here and I get to work. And just like I'm doing right now, in between clients, I get to have that space, and it really helps recharge me and it helps me be the most optimal that I can be for the people I love, and so that I can actually have successful interactions, because them things do take a lot out of me, no matter how comfortable I am with them. The second thing is that I know that you need consistency and predictability. And again, I know that this kind of comes under the profile, but again, I don't think that people understand just how much these things are needed. And if these things are not happening, just the level of impact that they will have on you and your general well being and how optimal you get to be living. If you are just autistic, I imagine that you will naturally probably have a routine where these things are implemented all of the time. If you are both autistic and ADHD, so ADHD, I imagine that this must be a lot harder. So sometimes we might need assistance with this. And if you are just somebody who loves somebody who is on the spectrum, I can't stress enough how much this will fall under their love language. If you are consistent, if you are predictable, if you can preempt any change, I can promise you that they will be so much more responsive, so much easier to be around, because that is something I have to admit for myself. I'm not speaking for anybody else, but the less optimal I am, the harder I am to bear, the harder I am to be around, because I am no longer thriving. I am struggling, and my responses are a lot sharper. My ability to cope is not as well. My ability to be able to gather my thoughts or speak coherently or not instinctively want to push people away, ability to function begins, because it's not like an immediate fall over anymore, but it begins to crumble. And if somebody who loves me is able to go, do you know what? Jade needs consistency. I just need to explain this. Or, you know what, actually, that's going to be a bit of a change and Jade might need to know that. I love you dearly for considering that. In the same way that you might like to unwind on a Sunday with your favourite game, or in the same way that you might want to talk to me about your favourite movie. And I would do that because I love you, in the same way that you would do those things if you love those people, because it is not actually just an interest based thing either. Like, I would like it to be consistent, I would like it to be predictable. It is fundamentally in the wiring of the way that we work that we need that in order to just feel safe and not be pushed into survival. Number 3, my favorite, is clear communication. I know you need that. You need clear honest, concise information with no inferences, because that is not how you work. And again, the thing that I don't get about this personally, and again, I'm still trying to get my head around it, is that it would be so much more effective if we didn't just make assumptions, we didn't leave bits of information out and make inferences around. Why can't we just honestly communicate and actually look at that as a really positive thing, where what I mean is what I say, and what I say is what I mean, and what I do is what I intended to do, and what I didn't do is what I didn't intend to do. Like, there is no sort of complicating the matter. I don't understand why that is seen as a negative aspect. I actually did a worksheet on this about the 4 primary types of communication. And I found that I was trying to make a pros and a cons list, because I like to be fair, and I'm a very analytical person, about where are the pros and cons to each particular communication style. And the only one that I could find that doesn't really, in my mind, have a con is assertive communication, which often is just really clear, to the point communication. Aggressive communication has a con. Passive aggression just has cons, doesn't really have a pro. And passive communication, although it can still have its benefits, has its cons. So I don't understand why this is not something that we are pushing for anyway. So even though we might be encouraged that our communication style is the one at fault, I can't get my head around why it is. But anyway, back to the point, which is that we need clear communication. And I think one of the problems with clear communication from a therapist point of view is that I think people have to know themselves well enough and have that level of self-awareness in the first place, be able to effectively communicate about what their agenda is in the first place. And I think that's where the problem is often. Because say for example, I reacted in an anger or a fear-based response to something because actually I felt rejected in that moment. But I'm so scared that you will see that as a vulnerability or something undesirable, and you'll make me feel shameful about that, that I'm not going to be honest about that, because I'm not even being honest about that to myself. So I lack awareness. It's a blind spot of mine. So then I come at it as, no, I just reacted that way because of X, Y, and Z. And it just gets so complicated. But if we was all able to just be ourselves and understand ourselves from that space of clarity and honesty and self-awareness, and then approach the person with honesty, because obviously this can come in many layers, from surface level conversations where it just needs to be crystal clear and it just doesn't need to have any inference or assumptions, all the way down to the sort of like internal subconscious world, them sort of core beliefs that we are being driven or dragged by, that other people are not aware of and that we're not necessarily aware of. You get how complicated this world is and how stressful that is for everybody involved, but we're the ones who are saying it. Anyway, that's way more than I wanted to say on that particular subject. I really wanted to keep this video short, but there I go on my tangents, and I could say way more about that as well. Number 4 would be time to invest in positive monotropism. So monotropism is this theory that's been coined that is predominantly affects autistic people, where their attention of focus is like the equivalent of like an intense flashlight, where it will zone in on one area and it will zone in on it deeply. Whereas most people are polytropic thinkers and they're able to highlight with like an overhead light lots of information, but not to a deep capacity. But they have lots of knowledge in lots of areas that cover lots of different areas, and they're able to kind of bounce around the sort of, I guess, life and the arena of life and have enough information to get by. Whereas the monotropism way of thinking doesn't always allow for that. But I think that although monotropism for myself can be both positive and negative, and again, I can make a video on this if people want it, what I find is that if I use my monotropism, because it is the way that I operate and think, and I have lots of gaps in my knowledge, but I also have lots of areas where I've got a deep interest and I have a deeper layered knowledge than the average person in that particular subject. When it's a positive thing, I thrive and I really, really enjoy it. For example, as a way I've been dealing with burnout, you might have seen on my other video, is through art and non-verbal expression. And it is helping me recover from all the things that get taken away from me in burnout. It gives me back. And that is monotropism, where I'm obsessing over artwork currently and creating art pieces and getting lost in the world of creating artwork. That is really positive for me. It doesn't have any negative consequences other than the obvious ones, like I really struggle to jump off or come away from, and I have to be reminded that my husband might want to spend time with me when the kids are asleep, and he might actually just want to be prioritized, or do you know what, Jade, you need to get a shower. And other than those things, it's mainly positive. I think that we all need to be able to have time where we get to engage in our monotropism in a positive way, because monotropism can be also have a negative spiral, and that if we're falling into that category, we really need to be careful, because it could be that you're obsessing over something that creates negative beliefs, or something where there is no particular answer to the thing that you're trying to find an answer for, and it can make us quite unwell. But as long as it's a positive thing, I do think that we actively need, not want, not desire, not, oh, it'd be nice if we could, need for optimal sort of recovery and for optimal living in the way that our brains are wired up, that we get to engage in our special interests in a very monotropic way, where some people might, be encouraged to do multiple activities because they are polytropic. It might be worth encouraging that actually somebody with autism who is monotropic and has a specific interest, like, I don't know, Pokemon, for example, that they get to engage, once a week in going to a social event where they play Pokemon, and they get to talk about Pokemon for that whole, 2 to 3 hours, like there is one near me. And then they get to also do it on a Sunday where they don't have any other demands. They just get to engage in it and just have that real sort of saturation in the thing that helps them thrive. Number 5 would be that you need inclusive acceptance and understanding. So you need somebody to understand, using the last point that I've just said, that you're not neurotypical, and that actually encouraging you to keep going to different social events, and it's not going to actually fulfill you in the social connection that you absolutely do need in the same way that everybody needs, that it might do for a neurotypical person. And you need people to understand that, and not only understand that, but advocate for that. You also need people to accept that about you without trying to make you or mold you into something else, like encouraging you to be a hyper social, hobby filled, sort of pushing you to burnout individual that you just never are going to be. And I'm not in any way. And I know that I sit on a different part of the fence than most people with this. I am in no way saying that I think that we should always just not push ourselves to achieve things that we think are important for us to achieve, that are good for our development as people. I'm not saying that we should be capping or cutting that out at all, but I think that we should be doing it with the person in mind. Number 6 would be sensory accommodations, but also sensory stimulation. My loop headphones, I know that this woman was saying on TikTok that she attaches them to her earrings. I have my loop headphones in all night, and on certain days, not all days. And again, I can hear slightly, so it's not like dysfunctional, but it cuts noise down to a minimal that actually regulates my nervous system like I've never seen before. And I've never actually had headphones that work that well before, so I absolutely do advocate for those. And this is not a plug. I've not been told to say that. They are brilliant. If sound is something that you find overstimulating, and you're not obviously understimulated, because then you would be seeking that stimulus. It could be that you are seeking stimulus in some regard. For me, it's firm touch, light touch makes me feel a type of way. So that could be a weighted blanket. The list goes on. However, this is very unique to the autistic community. I'm not saying that only people with autism experience it, but we know that it's predominantly something that will need to be accommodated or seeked for that person to live and feel optimal. 7 is opportunities to build mastery, because I feel like this is something that is taken sometimes taken away from the autistic community because of the encouragement to be a polytropic thinker and to have polytropic interests and to thrive polytropically. And if that is not the case, because maybe it is for some, but I don't know any, the opportunity to thrive in the particular area that they are good at is taken away. And I don't think it should be. I think that that is something that you need and I need, and everyone that I know on the autistic spectrum also need. And like I say, I sit on a different part of the fence about how I don't want certain things taken away from me as a way of accommodating me, when I believe that absolutely with different accommodations, with a different approach, I can actually master this and I can actually thrive and begin to attain mastery in things that I might never have been able to had I either had ableist views and been encouraged to exist in a certain way, or alternatively, which I am seeing, and again, everyone's allowed their own opinion on this sort of opposition to ableist, which is sort of enabling, and I know people might think that this is ableist in itself, internalized ableism, but I promise you it isn't, which is I'm going to enable them to never have to consider anything outside of the realm of how they operate and exist and what they need in that moment, and how once they've mastered that particular thing, that they can't go on to master something additional to that. I wouldn't want to be dimensional in that. I hope that makes sense. And the eighth thing, the final thing that I know that you need, is you do need social connection, and you do need to socialize, but in a very different capacity and in a social situation that you are comfortable with. An example of this is we go to a place called Geek Retreat, and it is full of things like Dungeons and Dragons, Beyblading, Lacana, Pokemon, and I'm fairly confident that pretty much everybody in those spaces is neurodivergent in some regard. And it is not the typical space that exists in the world, but it is a space where anyone who's different can thrive, and they get confident in having conversations, and they feel good, and they can talk about their interests with other people who are also interested in it to a deep capacity that nobody's shutting them down and making them feel inadequate or silly for. And it's just wonderful. And when you go to a space like that, that is just so rare in society, in the world, and you come away feeling on a high, and you come away feeling amazed and grateful that spaces like that exist, you realize that you have always needed those spaces. Them spaces haven't always been available to you. What other things can you say that autistic people need that I have not added to the list? I'd love to hear from you. Speak soon.